How y'all doing? This is Rebel Wow here with a few little comments about what was going on over the General Lee statue being taken down. And that should have been left up because that was part of our heritage, part of our tradition, and part of our history. And you can't, it's almost like what communist China, Russia used to do, where they would take down statues or any written thing on the enemies of the state once they became an enemy of the state. It's no different than communist Russia. This pretended moral outrage on the left is just astounding. There's so many things you people don't know. It's amazing, or if you did know, you just don't want to talk about it. Regarding slavery, there were states down south during the war, or even before the war, that were contemplating getting rid of it, abolishing slavery. Slavery wasn't the main issue for the Civil War. A lot of you YouTube clowns keep saying it, but it's a bunch of bullshit. I've got a video I'm going to attach to this, and it'll basically explain the things quite succinctly, but just a few other things called facts. Did you know that there are blacks who are just as prejudiced as whites? We have friends, black friends, that told us something that just blew our minds. They said that where they came from, light-skinned blacks were prejudiced against darker-skinned blacks. They also told us they came from Georgia. They lived in Georgia originally before moving north. And they said that, yeah, there was racism in certain pockets of Georgia and all. But whatever racism they encountered down there, down south, and there in other southern states they had traveled, was over. It was open. It was out in the open. It wasn't hypocritical. They said up north, they found racism, but it's more subtle, more cowardly. The Yankees up there kind of hid it, And that astounded me. And slavery, of course. Did you know? You probably don't know this, or you just want to ignore it. Most of the slaves were sold into slavery by their own tribesmen, their tribal leaders, other Africans. So they did it to themselves to a certain extent. But I'm not exonerating slavery. I'm just giving you some facts. But anyway, enjoy the next video. I'll try to watch it. I'm going to keep the comments enabled because I'm curious to see what you dick fucks on YouTube are going to say regarding these things, these facts I just hit you with. But one other thing, Sherman, I think I referred to him as a war criminal in the next video. I think he would have probably been executed as a war criminal had the South won the Civil War because he was a butcher. What he did, he destroyed cities in Georgia such as Savannah. He totally destroyed it, declared war on civilians just like soldiers. But so much from the left with your bullshit. So fuck your moral outrage. Thank y'all. Well, folks, they found a solution to that horrific shooting at that church by that madman who should be executed. I'm not a fan of the death penalty, but if anybody should be juiced, it should be him for that horrendous act. But apparently, it's a Confederate flag. If you remove the Confederate flag, it'll all go the fuck away. It's amazing. Everybody's jumping on a fucking bandwagon. All these states all of a sudden now starting to outlaw it. I got this hat at Amazon. I couldn't get it now because Amazon has banned the sale of Confederate flags or hats or anything. Right? Well, the flag's the fucking thing. Because, the Civil War, or as we Southerners call it, the War of Northern Aggression, and it was Northern Aggression, that's the cause for all the shootings and everything in this country. It's nothing else. Instant. Over, isn't it? Well, people ought to learn about history. They ought to really think before they talk. When I was in the 11th grade in high school in a northern city, I knew the Civil War was more than about slavery. In fact, slavery was a minor issue. In fact, slavery was guaranteed by the Constitution of the United States back then. And in fact, Lincoln didn't have that as his priority, even though he may have spoke out against it. There were at least 5 major reasons for the Civil War. And slavery was down. I mean, the South used slave labor. It was to their benefit to pick the cotton or whatever and all that, but that wasn't the issue. I've got a couple of sites here I'm going to look at. I'm going to talk about them real fast. Actually, I'm going to read you. I actually took the comments from 2 different sites. One's from pbs.org, and I'll bookmark that in the description. It says people think it was the moral issue, the Civil War issue was slavery. It wasn't. In fact, there was the economics of slavery and the political control of that system that was central to the conflict. Another site that I looked at, it said that the South wanted to expand into the West with slaves as the main source of workers. The North wanted to expand also, but they wanted to counter with white workers. Back then, a white worker was a slave. I mean, really, can anyone say railroads and Chinese workers? But the key issue was states' rights over federalism. The southern states wanted to assert their authority over the federal government so they could abolish federal laws they didn't support. And that's being done now. I mean, fucking Texas wants to get rid of everything within the federal government, right? So they want to get rid of laws, especially ones interfering with the South's right to keep slaves. Another factor, though, was the territorial expansion, as I talked about, moving out to the West. And meanwhile, the newly formed Republican Party, whose members were strongly opposed to the westward expansion of slavery in new states, were gaining prominence. They weren't opposed to slavery in the southern states. They were just opposed to it being expanded outward. The election of a Republican, Abraham Lincoln, pretty much sealed the deal. He got in without a single southern electoral vote. And then it was a clear signal southern states lost all their influence. Feeling excluded from the political system, they turned to the only alternative they believed was left to them, secession, a political decision that led to war. Another article from the Baltimore Sun, it says the war resulted from causes unrelated to slavery and abolition. It was entirely a consequence of the southern states' secession. This article, or another article, said had they not seceded from the Union and had not South Carolina fired upon Fort Sumter, they might have worked out an agreement, some kind of amicable deal, and eventually slavery would have been abolished, but they would have been compensated in some way by the federal government through taxation or whatever. Both Lincoln and the slaveholders well knew in 1860 a constitutional amendment ending slavery would never be mathematically feasible. There was a thing about tariffs, excessive tariffs that the federal government was putting on the South. Foreign governments retaliated for it with tariffs of their own. And these things were a heavy burden to Southerners. It says that the Southerners were generating 2/3 of U.S. exports. So they were bearing 2/3 of the retaliatory tariffs abroad. The result was that 18.5% of America's citizens who lived in the South were saddled with 3 times the proportionate share of the federal government's cost. In the face of all these considerations, Lincoln could have proposed a Southern slave emancipation, reciprocated by a sweeping federal fiscal reform, which I alluded to before, that could replace the protective tariff with a nationwide income tax. Instead, Lincoln's remedy was a catastrophic one, which denied Southerners their succession by military force, and we know what happened then. We lost more people in that war than any war since then, including both World War I and the Second World War. I have a lot of friends in the South. I got this one guy, Mr. Crowley. By the way, he's the one who does my intros and my ending videos. I don't put his name in the credits anymore because he keeps changing his name. But he's one of my closest friends. He's from Tennessee. When I was in the military, I had Southern friends. They got a way of life down there, and it was basically a way of life. And okay, the slavery part sucked, but it was more than that, as I just said very briefly. And when I was in 11th grade, I defended the South in our history class because of their way of life, because it was states' rights over federal rights. And I defended them vigorously. We had a series of weekly debates about it. I had black students in my class, and they fucking applauded me. They applauded me defending the South. And only one of them was actually from, I think, Virginia. Oh, okay? So it's more than a shit about a little fucking thing. But you know what the problem is with the killings, the shootings, all that shit? It has nothing to do with this magnificent flag or symbol or anything. No. It has to do with something quite simple. In America, we have this attitude, my dick is bigger than your dick. And I'm going to fuck with you. And we love the military. And because of the fact that this place is overrun by fucking Jesus freaks, God, country, and apple pie and all, and the military fighting all over the place and always in continual wars, the shootings are an outgrowth of that. It's only an extension of what we're doing overseas and other places and all. But everybody's got to be a fucking hero. This country praises war and praises violence and all. And it's so subtle at times. Even subtle. It's there. I mean, I watch TV and you notice on these programs where somebody is playing a person in the military, or most of the ones I watch, they're vets. They're always either a Marine, most of them are fucking Marines, or there's Navy SEALs or Army Rangers. No one's ever a fucking grunt or a swabby in the Navy,
It's a thing of that. It's just this mystique. This is why Hillary Clinton got caught in that lie about her plane when it was landing in Bosnia. It was under fire. She was just playing the military act. That's all. The gun act. My gun. I got a gun too. My gun. My dick. My gun is as big as your gun dick or whatever. Okay. Donnie Wahlberg, right? He's in that show, that cop show, which I literally detest, but my wife loves it. Blue Bloods. I think it's Blue Bloods, right? I remember there was one show where they were asking about his war experience. He did 38 tours in Iraq. Okay, it wasn't that many, but he was in the Marines. And he was in Fallujah. And he was the only one that got out from his squad. The only one. Which begs the question, Donnie, why the fuck did you get out and they didn't? Did you run away? Well, the only Fallujah that the real Donnie Wahlberg served in was a Fallujah County jail in Kentucky. It wasn't Fallujah, it was Louisville, where he was brought in after going through a berserk drug binge or some shit and set fire to his fucking mattress. We got the John Wayne mentality. I looked up that. Is John Wayne a war hero? Somebody actually had to ask that because of all the fucking war movies he made. No. But somebody said he is the recipient of the nation's highest honor for a citizen, the U.S. Presidential Medal of Freedom. I guess that's because he played war movies, right? It says he tried to enlist but was rejected due to an old football injury, which is bullshit because later on somebody else writes down, interesting, you would reverse the course of his actions. John Wayne, this other guy writes, went to Mexico until his request for exemption for having too many children was approved. And then he brought up the football injury. Hero? No. Movie star? Yeah. No, he was no war hero. But that's the whole fucking thing about this country. That's the thing about the guns and all, and the violence and all, So leave the South alone, okay? It's not this flag. Like I said, it was the war of northern aggression. And if you want to talk about violence, maybe you ought to look at, you study William Tecumseh Sherman as marched through Georgia. Sherman's known as the author or the founder of modern-day warfare against civilians. He killed everybody. Contrast that with General Robert E. Lee when he brought the Virginia Army of Virginia into Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. There wasn't one story about any kind of pillaging or anything. Knowing Robert E. Lee, I was a Civil War buff too when I was in high school. He was a gentleman. He probably warned his troops to behave accordingly. It's like Doc Holliday said. He was from Georgia. And in a book, a semi-autobiography I read of him, he was dressing down a Union officer years after the war. Union officer was a scumbag, a coward, and a thief. And Holliday was dressing him down. At the end, he ended his tirade by saying, and to think that we lost the war to you savages. Yeah. So it's not the flag. And I wear this hat proudly, my Southern friends. So get off the fucking bandwagon. Look deeper. The problem's a lot deeper.